I had NT Fryer reach out and tag us and say, FYI on Uniswap V3 positions, using synergies, oxymhedrons, front end for Uniswap testnet V3, my non-ETH LP positions, the non-ETH ones, came over just fine, could interact, maintain them just as the Ethereum network. And then Alex confirmed this as well, or I guess added on to it. Pretty sure only the ETH pairs are intended to be harvested. So for example, X USDC LP would not be, since ETH USDC and ETH Hex are harvested, then a crazy situation, I guess, could happen from that. Does that make sense to you?
Yeah, so that makes sense. So check it out. ETH has a certain supply of the native gas coin, and PulseChain has a certain supply of its native gas coin, but it's very different. It's, you know, 1,000,000 to 1 or whatever it is, right? So there has to be 1,000,000 times more ETH accounted for and put into the right places on PulseChain. So when you copy over all these pairs, if it's just two ERC20s paired together, that doesn't need to be, like, nothing needs to change, right? There's no supply difference across the two chains. If there's a token that had a supply of, I don't know, 17 million, there's going to be 17 million of those tokens on PulseChain. And then if it was paired to a different token that had a supply of, 10 million tokens, well, there's already going to be 10 million of those tokens on PulseChain. And then those ratios and those pools don't really need to change to account for their value across each other, right? This many of this token should still be tradable for, whatever percentage of this many of this token. So those ratios over in Uniswap of ERCs to ERC20, copy over to PulseChain, nothing needs to change. Those ratios stay intact. But what does need to be accounted for is anything that's paired back to ETH on Ethereum chain. You can't keep that same ratio on PulseChain because you'd have like a massive supply difference outside of that pool. That means that ratio is just way skewed by like 1,000,000x or something, right? Copy over everything and just leave it intact, and you have way less pulse than you're supposed to have in that pool because the supply difference is so much greater.
Mm-hmm.
It, like, if one chain was a chain that was denominated in $1, and that, don't think of the value of $1. Just like, $1, but there's 100 pennies in $1, 100 cents in $1. And if PulseChain was, a chain denominated in pennies, you would want to see wherever there used to be $1, instead now there's 100 pennies, right? Otherwise the ratio is wrong. So what you do is you simply, everything copies over, and then you're like, okay, how do I fix that ratio? How do I correct it because of the supply difference in the native coin? And all that has to happen and will happen is a smart contract or a bot runs around with a supply of pulse that it already owns, and it uses that to start buying up all the PRC20s out of the popular dexes, such as Uniswap and SushiSwap and maybe even some of the Aave pools or whatnot. I have no idea. It's not going to hit all the pools, but it's going to hit a lot of the popular ones. And then now that entity or that, code that somebody's pre-written now owns all those PRC20s and is welcome to pair those back into a new DEX, PulseX, at the correct ratio. So it takes those PRC20s, it takes some of the Pulse, and it deposits those and creates a liquidity pool. And now that liquidity pool is the correct ratio. Now, depth of that pool may not be the same. Maybe There will be some scaling in of the depth. Maybe it'll be a fixed depth at the beginning. Nobody really knows. I think Richard's figuring some of that stuff out right now.
Okay. But the general advice so far has been, hey, if you're providing liquidity for tokens such as Hex and stuff, pull it before mainnet, because you may not get access to, you may not get your copies, all that stuff. But it sounds like
depends, though. You could actually get a good deal. So what if your intention is you wanted to, let's think about this for a second. Let's say your intention is you wanted to acquire Pulse. And on ETH chain, you happen to have some ETH and you happen to have some, token, maybe Hex. Well, theoretically, you could pair those two things together, hold that through the fork, because what's going to happen on the other side on PulseChain is somebody's going to buy all that Hex from you, and they're going to leave you some Pulse. The fixer bot has to buy that Hex from your smart contracted position. It can't just steal it from you and rip it out of your wallet, right? So it literally has to interact with those Uniswap contracts, depositing some Pulse and taking away your Hex, leaving you with Pulse.
But not
now,
a lot of Pulse.
Have your original Hex on the ETH chain and your original ETH, and you're welcome to swap back into whatever you want. But when you show up the Pulse chain, you'll find if you use the front end like Alex's Uniswap front end that he'll connect in, you go to withdraw your liquidity and you have way more Pulse and like almost no Hex left. You just got left with Pulse because the bot bought all your Hex from you. You might be muted. There you go.
Yeah, I was saying, I think that's the site, uniswap.hedron.pro, I think is Alex's instance that works with V3, I believe. So okay, that's one way, but wouldn't you get a worse deal? Like, wouldn't the fixer bot get a really good deal and not have to give you that much Pulse for your Hex?
It depends on how fast other people are, right? So that bot has to experience some slippage, so to speak, just like anybody else would. Right. So it has to buy through all the, the slippage that it would normally be if it, so if it's draining the pool or close to draining the pool that you're participating in as an LP, you could, you could theoretically try some things on Ethereum chain. You could put in an LP, maybe single-sided LP with Hex like at a ridiculous price, like $1 or something, paired back to ETH. Or set it at like $2 paired back to ETH. We don't know how far into those pools that fixer bot's going to buy, right? So you could just go above the current market price. You could go, okay, it's 7 or 8 cents right now. Okay, set it at a 30 cent, set it at a 20 cent. Okay, maybe that fixer bot's going to come through and it's just going to buy and eat all the slippage to that whole pool, and it's actually going to give you a pretty good rate for your Hex and lead you with more Pulse than you would otherwise get. We just don't know. This is one way to acquire at least some Pulse. We'll never know how much Pulse until after people try it. Now, could that be a better or worse rate than somebody just holding Hex or holding anything and then dumping that if they wanted to for Pulse on the other side? Well, that's also dependent on the thickness of those pools, right? What if Richard launches those pools really thin so the slippage is really high? So when you're dumping it, you're the one eating the slippage instead of the fixer bot eating the slippage, right? So maybe it is a better rate to just have the fixer bot eat all the slippage and leave you some Pulse, then you dump that same token if you're holding it liquid to try and acquire Pulse. We'll just never know until it all plays out.
Well, if you were to hold LP through the fork, wouldn't the strategy be to hold the pairs that you think will have some sort of value? If you can unwrap them in Uniswap afterwards, then you still get your copies and you can make the fees while all the chaos is happening? Wouldn't that be a play?
What do you believe will have value?
Well, for example, hexahedron.
Sure. Yep, people will trade, and there'll be a market for hexahedron.
Mm-hmm.
What about
something like that?
What about some other random tokens that nobody ever talks about in the Hex community?
Well, I mean, the biggest pull is Hex USDC, but common understanding would be USDC is not wouldn't be the one you'd want to hold through the fork, for those reasons.
You're right, and it's also interesting to remember that Hex is primarily paired to USDC. So right now, Uniswap has like 3 hexes paired to like 3.7 million USDC. It's paired to like $700,000 worth of ETH. So the bigger pool is USDC. That's going to copy over. But what does that look like? If there's 3.7 million USDC paired to Hex, but outside of that, you've got hundreds of millions of dollars worth of USDC that people might dump, there becomes this arbitrage where like Hex is going to go down, could go down significantly. Or if people are dumping USDC and it's like very easy to obtain and they do it fast, you could obtain millions of USDC and just go and just drain all the Hex out of that Uniswap pool really quickly. If Hex remains paired to USDC, I think we're in for some very high volatility in the first day of PulseChain. Because I do believe there will be lots and lots of dumping of USDC. If Hex is remaining paired to it, there's going to be some wild things happening with Hex.
So if you're doing LP for Hex USDC or Hex ETH, those seem to be not ideal situations to hold through the fork.
Well, if you're LPing Hex to USDC, that actually could be a decent play. A horrible play, because people would be dumping their USDC, taking out the Hex, and leaving you with a whole bunch of USDC that everyone else has also dumped and is not even redeemable. And you can easily get millions of them for cheap, for nothing. So it could be dangerous to be an LP with Hex paired to USDC. We have hopes and dreams that it's going to be worth $1. It's never proven that that's even practical at all to even attempt to do. It's not redeemable, and the dollar, any stablecoin that wishes to maintain a peg to $1 happens solely because it's redeemable. Period. Yep. It has to be redeemable. If something's no longer redeemable, then the only thing that keeps it at $1 is complete speculation. But speculation on what? That it will become redeemable? No, because it won't. So there's no arbitrage where people would ever desire to buy it to bring it back up to $1 because they know they're going to be able to redeem it for $1 somewhere else. So when it dips in price, who's going to buy it back up to bring it to $1? Are you? If you find 75-cent copied USDC, are you going to buy that because you think it's a good deal, knowing that it's not redeemable?
Not 75 cents, maybe 1 cent or something like that.
Maybe 1 cent, because USDC will find a value, but it might be very, very low, and it will become a degen thing that they're like, oh, it's 1 cent today, it's 2 cents tomorrow, it's half a cent the next day, and people are just taking each other's money like a degen coin.
It'd be funny if like everyone decided it's worth 1 cent, so USDC coin is turned into US 1 cent coin, and like everyone trades it based on that.
If it goes low enough, maybe somebody will make it redeemable. Like, oh, okay, the copied USDC is now redeemable in my protocol for a penny. right? Like you could like there's some crazy things people could attempt to try, but it's going to be super volatile in the early days.
So Hex ETH getting scooped up by the AMM bot. Hex USDC, you think there's going to be a lot of sell pressure on USDC. So also probably not a good LP play. Maybe there's some super volatile fee generation stuff that's going on leading up to launch or during launch on the Ethereum side. But on the PulseChain side, you think it's going to get hammered?
I think a lot of things on PulseChain are going to get hammered. I think the things that are going to do well are going to be the natively launched things on the chain. So that's besides Hex, okay, because our community will make that copied Hex valuable. All right, like we've been talking about it for years. There's going to be a copy of Hex, and we are going to make it valuable. Right, we're going to buy it, and we're going to participate in liquidity, and we're just going to make it work, right? But I think besides Hex, the natively launched stuff, so that would be PulseX, that would be loan token, Watt, Fiat, all these things that are natively launching that have a use case, that have communities behind them already, that have people like literally using these protocols. Those things are going to have value. But the things that are copied, we keep saying to ourselves that we want all these copies to be valuable, that we need people to come over and provide liquidity. Pair your copied, your bridged in thing to the copied thing to give it value. To give it value to me means exit liquidity. You have to remember, these are free. It's photocopied out of thin air. And the people who are getting those copies, like, sure, you could pair a copy to a bridged in thing at whatever ratio you want. It doesn't have to be 1-to-1. You could take link, copy, and pair it to link bridged in, and you could say, okay, it takes 100 copied link, to buy one real bridged in link. Okay, you could do that, but even doing that, you're introducing weird uncertainty and confusion to the markets, because now people go to those liquidity pools and they see link paired to link, and it's like, wow, why is these ratios all weird? And like normally what happens when things are out of whack to such a degree, people just dump their free thing for the copy thing, and they don't even care what the rate is. They just know that the real thing that was bridged in has real value. So I do think that most of the PRC20s, no matter how hard we try, no matter how hard we incentivize liquidity, and you will find incentivized liquidity pools, you will be incentivized to bring in some wrap things and pair them to some copy things. But you have to be very, very careful, because markets typically dump things that they got for free. Even Richard says that all the time. And I know he and we all want these copies to have value, but I don't believe that 99% of them will be able to have value. I think most of them will dump. The natively launched protocols with teams behind them that are working, with communities that are excited, those are the things that will have value, and all the dumpage will flow into those things.